Yo, what's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and today we are taking a look at the Detroit Red Wings. And I know there's a lot of frustration right now in Detroit, and for rightful reasons, right? You know, you're a couple years into the rebuild now. Steve Yzerman's been there a little while, and I think people want some level of accountability for how things fell apart this season, but we have to look at the timeline. And I thought, a really interesting comparison, it's not necessarily the same, but it's a good comparable for what Yzerman's plan is, right? Because it's probably not too different from what we saw in Tampa when he was with the Lightning. How long did it take him to build the Tampa Bay Lightning to what they are? Because that is the expectation in Detroit now, right? He was, obviously he was a huge winner in his time in Detroit, becomes the GM of the Lightning, and all the success they've had is one of the most successful franchises, if not the most successful franchise in the late 2010s. Can they bring that magic to Detroit? And what's interesting is, looking at the timeline, you might be a little bit surprised with how things might go. So I think I've said enough here. Let's start off with how things started, right? So Steve Yzerman became the GM of the Tampa Bay Lightning in 2010, right? So from 2010 to, I believe, what year is it? I think he became the GM of the Red Wings in 2020, but I don't remember for certain. When did he become GM? He's been GM of the Red Wings since 2019, so April of 2019. So basically a decade. Stevie Y was in Tampa, right? So this is the season that he came in, right? So they missed the playoffs this year, right? So they have 3 straight seasons. Tampa missed the playoffs. He comes in his first season. They go to the conference finals. All right. So things didn't go that easy right off the bat, right, for the Red Wings, but okay. Then they missed the playoffs 2 straight seasons after going to the conference final. So that's a little bit odd, right? And they lose in the first round of Montreal, right? They got swept in 2014. The Canadiens went on a run that year, though, so yeah, it sucks, but it's not the worst thing in the world. And then, boom. Here we are. So now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years removed from kind of coming in, he already got this team to the Stanley Cup final, where they were basically 2 wins away from winning the Stanley Cup against the Blackhawks. And then you see a trip to the conference finals, right, in 2016. 2017, they missed the playoffs again, but then, here we go. Now they lose in the conference finals again. The historic 2019 collapse, which ended up being Yzerman's last season in Tampa, which is this year. But you look at, in 9 years, the amount of success they did have. But let's look at the reality here. In those 9 seasons, they did not win a Stanley Cup. In 2020 and 2021, and really 2023, those were the years of success in Tampa. So it took Yzerman a decade. Since Yzerman came in, it took the Lightning a decade to win a Stanley Cup. Now, did the process go a lot quicker in Tampa? Yes, absolutely. But what it really came down to was, yes, the combination of Kucherov and Vasilevsky coming in were huge, but it was also, it took time. And I know that's not something Red Wings fans want to hear because, what are we now? It's now 2024. It's been 5 years. And at this point, Tampa Bay had already made it to the Stanley Cup final in the Yzerman era. So what is happening in Detroit? It's a totally different situation. They don't have a Steven Stamkos. As good as Larkin is, that's not the same level. So it takes time. And within the next 5 years, if we're talking about still the fact that the Red Wings are not where they want to be 10 years into the rebuild, well, then that's too much. And you obviously can get a pretty good idea of Yzerman's job being on the line at that point. But I don't think it's going to take that long. I don't think the Red Wings are that far off. Yes, is it a miscalculation? You would have liked to made the playoffs this year. Absolutely. But now let's get into, now that we kind of discussed the timeline, it puts into perspective more the Red Wings situation, right? Because as much as it sucks that they missed the playoffs, it's only year 5, right? And I hate saying it's only been 5 years because this has been a long stretch for the Red Wings. They expect playoffs every single year. And a lot of people growing up have seen the 20-year run where where they made the playoffs every single year for like 22 straight years or something like that. So this is definitely a different situation, right, for the Red Wings. But I want to show you guys something here. And what I'm going to show you real quick is the NHL stats, okay? Now, you might be saying to yourself, Kevin, why are you showing us the top point producers in the National Hockey League? Nikita Kucherov, McKinnon, McDavid, Panarin, Pasternak, Matthews, Draisaitl, Rantanen, Miller, Nylander, Kaprizov, right? All those guys have 96, 103, 107, 120, 149, 140, 144 points. Who is the top point producer for the Detroit Red Wings? Do they have anybody near that? No. Lucas Raymond had 72 points this season. Kucherov basically doubled his point production. So, is that what the Red Wings are missing? Yes. That is a huge part of the issues for the Red Wings. They did not get enough goal scoring. And you want to talk about making it on a deep playoff run, avoiding those big droughts where you just go without scoring a goal for a long stretch of time. You don't have that with players that are putting up 100 plus points a year. Right? And that's why I look at another similar team that, is kind of upset about missing the playoffs, similar to the Red Wings, is the Flyers are like that. The Flyers had a huge collapse. At least the Red Wings didn't collapse like that. But what is a similarity there? The Flyers don't have that Claude Giroux type player anymore, or in his prime James Van Riemsdyk. They don't have that guy that can just score at will and is scoring a point per game at least. And the Red Wings had stretches during the season where they had stretches where they would win 4 of 16 games. And you can't do that. You can't expect to make the playoffs with that type of record. Now, I understand, is the rules necessarily the best with, rewarding teams for losing? Like in the overtime situation, they're, of course, calling out my Islanders on that. But at the end of the day, and this is what I always say about officiating and things like that, is you can be mad at the officiating and stuff all you want, but make the game in your hands, meaning you take care of business and everything will fall into place. But if you're relying on the rules or this or that to make your ticket, whether you get into the playoffs or not, make yourself assertive enough where that doesn't even matter, right? Do you hear teams like the Bruins or the Panthers or the Lightning or the Rangers or any of those teams complaining about the overtime situation? No. Because they won so many games that it didn't matter. They weren't in a situation where they were kind of just maybe or maybe not getting into the playoffs. Make it where there is no doubt about it. If the Red Wings had 40 wins this season and not 38, we'd be talking about Red Wings hockey right now. So that's the difference between, like I said earlier, having those star players that can put up 100 points. And I'm not even saying 100 points. If the Red Wings got a guy that had 90 points this season, we might be talking about 40 wins and making the playoffs for the Red Wings. The gap is that small, but that is the difference. And I got to be honest, I watched that game against the Washington Capitals 2 weeks ago. Right? It was 2 weeks ago. And they basically lost the game 2-0. They scored a goal with, a second left in regulation. Charlie Lindgren's been playing great. They played a hot goalie. But that doesn't matter. You have to find a way to win those games. That's a 4-point game that, again, they're mad about the rules. They're mad that the Flyers pulled the goalie and there's this Illuminati and this and that. If the Red Wings won that game over the Capitals, that's 2 less points the Capitals would have had. That's 2 more points the Red Wings would have had. That is what you have. You have to win those games. And the Red Wings knew it. The Red Wings fans and the players knew after that game, oh shit, we're in trouble. And at the end of the day, because of that loss, they had to rely on the point system to help them or not help them out to make the playoffs. And ultimately, it didn't land in their favor. And like I said, the bridge between being a rebuilding team that you're hoping to tank so you could get the top picks to becoming a contender again. People don't realize it's a lot easier to tear a team down than to build it back up. And that's why everybody says, when their team's not playing well, just tear it apart, rip it apart, just rebuild it from scratch. It's easy for you to say. But what about the guy that's the head coach or the GM? Is that an easy decision to make? You're putting your job on the line. And chances are you will not be there by the end of that rebuild, because most of the time, GMs that are there for a rebuild don't stay. And even someone like Steve Yzerman, who has rebuilt this franchise, has I've heard people earlier this year talking about firing Steve Yzerman, which I think is crazy, but that's what happens when you have all right, that's 4 years now, that's 5 years of missing the playoffs. What's going on here? What's going on with the clock? Come on, time's a ticking. Even on Steve Yzerman, that clock is ticking to some people. Not saying everybody, but some people out there have been saying that. And that's pretty telling, because a lot of people would say that Yzerman's the best GM in the league. So, with all that said, the key factors, really 3. In all facets of this team, there's a deficit. Between the pipes, that's 1, right? It wasn't good enough this year. You need to get that good goaltending. Alex Lyon played okay, right? But Ville Husso got hurt. He needs to stay healthy next year. The good news is they have Sebastian Cossa, who should be coming up, if not next season, definitely 2 years from now. But Red Wings fans don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that we have to wait another 2 years to see Cossa. And who knows if he's going to come out of the gate on fire. You don't know. So it's one of those things where it's frustrating right now, but you have to understand the future outlook. And I know it sucks hearing that, because if that's the case, another 2 years without a starting goalie, that's 7 years of Yzerman and rebuild. And that's too much. That's too much for Red Wings fans. And that's where you need, like I said, you need a healthy Ville Husso next season. You probably need another defenseman. A lot of people have been saying the Red Wings need 2 defensemen, but I would argue now with Simon Edvinsson coming in, that should hopefully alleviate that kind of mend that gap a little bit. But you probably still need another defenseman there. And you probably need and they don't grow on trees. They're not trading them away. They're not very easily going to free agency. You need a guy that puts up 100-plus points a year, whether that's a guy you draft or you trade for, whatever you have to do. That's the work of Steve Yzerman. He's got to find a way to bring those guys in. And maybe Lucas Raymond is that guy, or Dylan Larkin is that guy. But to what we've seen so far, they just have not been able to do that. And if the Red Wings want to get back to the playoffs, they need that number 1 center, like a legit number 1 center. That's an offensive threat every time he's on the ice. They need another solid defenseman, and they need a legitimate starting goaltender. And if the Red Wings can do those 3 things, whether they address that in free agency, whether they address it in a trade, or at the draft, I know Red Wings fans don't want to hear that, because that means 2 or 3 years of waiting, but let's be honest, where did we get Kucherov? Where did they get Vasilevsky? Where did they get these guys? They didn't come off of trees. Bishop was different because he had to trade for Bishop from Ottawa, but there wasn't a ton of upside at that point for Bishop. They had to develop him. That's kind of what we're looking at for the Red Wings, right? So, like I said, I know a lot of Red Wings fans are still upset about how the season ended, what could have been. They should have been in the playoffs. They had more wins than the Islanders and this and that. And listen, I'm an Islander fan, so I don't want to hear it. But the reality is, the teams that had a hot goaltender going into the playoffs made it, right? The Islanders with Varlamov, the Capitals with Lindgren made it because of the hot goaltending. And unfortunately for the Red Wings, the Flyers, and even the Penguins, to an extent, Ned kept them in it. Red Wings fans know Ned pretty well. He had a good season with the Penguins this year. It wasn't enough. Teams that didn't have hot goaltending down the stretch, it wasn't enough. They didn't make the playoffs, and ultimately that's what did them in. So I'd love to hear what Red Wings fans think, because I usually do this video every year. These videos do really well because I talk about kind of what I think of the Red Wings for the year, but I want to know what you guys think, because I think the Red Wings have a lot of upside. I think there's a lot of things that just, it's not happening fast enough, and I get it. Like it's been 5 years now with Yzerman, and there was the 2-year layover before that where they missed the playoffs. It's been a lot of losing in Detroit, a lot of losing seasons, a lot of no playoffs, and I think the fans are sick of it. And they have a lot of really good complementary, consistent players, but they don't have guys that can put them over the top. They don't have that Kucherov or Panarin or Pasternak And like I said, they don't grow on trees, but that is probably the difference for why the Red Wings are or aren't in the playoffs in 2024. I'd love to know what you guys think. Guys, if you like the content, want to see more of it, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you again next time. Peace out, guys.